Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to Convention of States, Indiana Live. Hope you like that introduction. I've been working on that for some time. I hope it came off okay, but we'll see. We'll see on the recording how that looks. And like I said, been working on that for some time now. So wanted to try it out tonight, see how it goes. Once again, welcome to our broadcast. My name's Dale Parrish. I'm the state director for Convention of States here in Indiana. And we have another great broadcast planned for you this evening. We're going to have 3 or 4 segments like we normally do. Our first segment will be a discussion period. Our second segment will be some information, just some general information about how we're doing here in Indiana with Convention of States. Third segment we'll talk about the basics of Convention of States. And then the fourth segment will wrap things up. Now, this first segment is our discussion period. And I'm going to bring Paul Phillips in again to talk with us. And what we're going to do tonight, Paul and I are going to kick off what we hope will become somewhat of a series. You know, one of the pillars, I'm going to call them pillars, one of the main pillars in our application to hold a convention of states deals with fiscal restraints. And that, of course, is we're talking about the national debt and spending and revenue and so forth. So, and how we can control that, how we can address that problem of deficits and national debt. And so what we're going to talk about tonight, when I bring Paul in, we're going to talk about the Indiana Balanced Budget Amendment. And this is very interesting because our state here has really taken some good steps to solidify our financial condition here in the state of Indiana. And I hope you'll find this very interesting. You may already know something about this, but if you don't, this is a good opportunity for you to learn more about this balanced budget amendment that we have here in the state. So without further ado, now I also want to warn you that I'm going to bring Paul into the broadcast here. We've been having some audio problems with Paul this evening, so I hope he comes across and sounds okay. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Dale. How you doing?
Good, good. That sounded very good, Paul. As a matter of fact, so maybe you're cured, huh?
Yeah, I think we got it fixed.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, we won't get into that right now. Okay. What I want, like I said, we're going to be talking about the Indiana Balanced Budget Amendment, Paul. And I know this was something that you were very interested in. You want to tell us how, and you know, and of course we've talked, as I mentioned in the lead-in, we talked about. Hold on here, I'm getting how fiscal restraints is part of our platform to call for a convention of states. How this fits in with that, correct?
Absolutely. A balanced budget amendment is perfectly consistent with our application for the Convention of States.
Okay. All right. Okay. Well, you want to give us a little background. How did this all get started?
Well, as you have in the headline here, it started with then Governor Pence in a 2015 State of the Union address proposing a balanced budget amendment for our Constitution. And one thing that I find interesting is the process for amending the Indiana Constitution is kind of unique. Now, anybody listening has probably heard us talk about the process in Article 5 for amending the federal Constitution, where amendments can be proposed in one of two ways. The legislature can propose them, or the states can apply for a convention to propose. Well, in Indiana, pardon me, the only way to propose an amendment is for it to be initiated by the legislature. So either house can propose an amendment, and it then needs to pass by each house by a simple majority vote. There's no two-thirds requirement. But then you have to wait for a subsequent election, which could be 1 or 2 years out. And after that election, the proposed amendment has to pass both houses again in the new assembly. And again, it's by majority vote. Then after that happens, the proposed amendment goes on the ballot, and the citizens of the state can then vote up or down on the proposed amendment. So it really takes a series of 3 votes and a process of roughly 3 to 4 years to get an amendment made to the Indiana Constitution.
Wow. Well, and I think what you were telling me was this finally came to vote in 2018. Am I right?
That's right, and it passed by 70 to 30% margin among the citizens of the state. So obviously, it was very popular with Hoosiers.
Yeah, and in order for this to be subject to an election, this was actually on the ballot in 2018. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So at any rate, that's the way it came to pass here in Indiana. The one thing I find interesting about that is Indiana has one of the most difficult methods for amending their constitution of any state. And the fact that amendments can only be initiated by the legislature seems to run counter to our argument that the federal Congress would never suggest an amendment to limit their power. Yet the Indiana General Assembly did just that. And so I've always wondered, well, why is that? And I think it really has to do with the Indiana state legislature being closer to home, that the more local politics are, the more effective it's going to be, and the more likely it's going to be to follow the will of the people.
We the people. That's right. That's what I think is the key here. But now this process that you described that can take 2-3 years. That's for any amendment to the Constitution, right? That's not just for budgetary amendments.
Right.
Any amendment.
Any amendment whatsoever.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that difficult. Gee, in a multi-year process, some things could go wrong. I mean, things could get lost, couldn't they?
Absolutely.
Overruled or tabled or whatever. I would assume that would be part subject to that kind of a process.
Yeah.
Well, very, very good. Well, okay, let's Paul, let's get into then the amendment details.
Okay.
What does the amendment set forth?
The heart of the amendment requires that in a budget cycle, and here in Indiana, it's a 2-year cycle. The budget is set for 2 years at a time, not 1 year like the federal government. But in a budget cycle, expenses cannot exceed revenue. And if they do, whatever amount expenses exceeded revenue gets taken out of the next cycle's budget right off the top. So
that sure is complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, any deficit, you have to pay that first before you can pay anything on the next 2-year budget.
Kind of sounds like the budget for your family and my family, doesn't it?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, there is an exception that the legislature can override that requirement, but it's a 2/3 vote of each house has to say, yes, there's some compelling reason for us to run a deficit. And that vote only works for one budget cycle. So if we implemented something like this with the federal government, if at the end of the year expenses exceeded revenue, and the Congress would say, oh, well, it's okay, we're at war, or we've had a natural disaster or something, that vote is good for only 1 year. And then we're back
what would be some instances at the state level that could cause expenses to unforeseen situations that could cause expenses to exceed revenues, like a disaster, a national, or
perhaps a statewide disaster. Who knows? But I think the wise thing here is that the way to override is you set an extraordinary vote as the trigger. Now, the Balanced Budget Amendment Task Force has proposed a balanced budget amendment for the federal government, which has the same requirement: expenses can't exceed revenue, but it says except in case of emergency. So then you're stuck with, okay, what constitutes an emergency? Who gets to decide that?
Right.
And I think we've got probably 14 active federal emergencies underway right now, emergency declarations. So that really doesn't provide a quality check like this 2/3 vote does.
Right, right.
And then the other thing that I think is very interesting in our balanced budget amendment is it requires that the budget includes fully funding any state pensions. So
yes.
You have to have all the pension payments up to date and enough money put aside for future pension obligations included in the budget. Now, imagine that with the federal government. For example, with Social Security, a pension obligation of the federal government, if we tell them you've got to prove that Social Security is fully funded every year as well.
Right. Well, we know that now you get into the unfunded liabilities part of our national debt situation, and that number is astronomical. I mean,
yes.
So my goodness. Well, you know, it's I don't know how to, can't find the words right now, but it's wonderful that our state is able to do this. You know, I'm from Illinois originally, and I still have friends living in Illinois, and oh my goodness, to hear some of the stories that come from them with the state of Illinois, how in the world that state could move from where they are now to the position that we are in here in Indiana. I don't see how that can happen, but we're very fortunate, I think, to have this kind of a situation or condition in our state.
Yes.
Well, I know this amendment didn't just come out of thin air, right?
Yeah, it's actually very similar to a balanced budget amendment that was proposed in the simulated Convention of States Convention back in 2016. So, you know, I guess in terms of timeline, the amendment was proposed here in Indiana and passed its first test in the assembly the year before we did the simulated convention. And one of our senators at that time, Brant Hirschman, attended the simulated convention. And
That's
I think
right.
it's no accident that in the simulated convention, we saw a similar amendment with that 2/3 vote requirement to override the balanced budget.
And now it kind of all comes together, doesn't it? Yeah. Well, I think you know, we talked about how fortunate we are to have that here. I just deleted it, but I think what we have here, though, is I think we have a model that could certainly be applied at the federal level, or something very similar, as well as other states, right?
Absolutely. And really, to me, in that most states do have a balanced budget amendment. my point being that many of the states can teach the federal government how to govern better, including being more fiscally responsible. So a great source for proposed amendments at the real convention when we hold it can be state constitutions and looking at things like their balanced budget amendments.
Okay. All right. Good. All right. Well, Paul, thank you very much for coming in and talking about this. Is a very interesting topic. Like I said, I'm hoping that this will kick off a series that we can present here on Indiana Live to address the national situation with our country and the fiscal restraints that we feel should be part of the Convention of States that will be held someday to propose amendments to address this situation. So,
right.
Again, thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you, Dale.
We'll see you. Have a good evening, bud.
You too.
Okay, everyone. Let's. One thing I did forget to mention prior to bringing Paul on, and this is something I try to incorporate into every broadcast, is my standard warning. Okay, and that is in the event that you would see your screen freeze up or possibly go blank. You please just assume we've encountered a technical problem, and I would ask that you not wait around for us to come back on, because we won't be coming back on. It just takes too long to get everything up and running again. So if that occurs, just close her down and put on your calendar to join us again on next Monday evening at 7 p.m. and we'll just move on. And you know, technology, how it is. Technology is wonderful as long as it works. Okay. All right. Well, to get into our next segment, I want to bring up a PowerPoint that I use for these purposes, and I'm going to also take the step here to make it more visible to everyone. So I'm going to expand the screen here, and you should be able to see that now a little more clearly than before. So let's get into, want to share with you some just some general information about how we're doing here in the state of Indiana. First of all, we have a number of resources available to us here in Indiana. And the main resource is our central main national website, conventionofstates.com. As I said, this is a national website, but we use this website and it's available to anyone that wants to go on the website. But there's also a back end of the website that we use for the administration here of Convention of States in our state. Obviously, that's not available to everyone. But embedded in the national website, conventionofstates.com, is our state website, our website page, conventionofstates.com/Indiana. So when you're on that website, you might want to tune into our state website page, obviously a little more focused look at our state and what's going on in our state. Social media platforms, we're on numerous platforms. We're on Facebook. We have a state Facebook page, Convention of States, Indiana. As a matter of fact, our broadcast this evening is coming to you through that Facebook page. YouTube channel, COS Indiana. Now, this is primarily for educational purposes. I have a number of narrated PowerPoint presentations on there. We have recordings of these broadcasts for you to view. And we also have links to Paul's podcast, the Free to Be Free podcast. He does, every so often, he puts together a podcast, and they're very, very interesting. We utilize them, as a matter of fact, for a number of our educational or our discussions that we engage in the broadcast. So we'll use one of his podcasts, excuse me, as the resource material for that discussion. So anyway, we have links there to all of Paul's podcasts. So I would encourage you to take a look at that too. And that's all on our YouTube channel, COS Indiana. We're also on Twitter, hashtag COS Indiana, Instagram, Convention of States Indiana. We're in LinkedIn, and we're on a number of other platforms as well. So we're out there, and if you want to see us, you should be able to find us. Give you some numbers real quickly. In 2018, we surpassed 30,000 supporters here in the state of Indiana. Been growing tremendously here in the state, and we are looking to achieve a 40,000 supporter mark here in 2019. About 2,900 volunteers, people have said they would be willing to help out if needed. And we have about 40 people in leadership roles. Now, if you have any inclination, any desire to get more involved in Convention of States, I would encourage you, please go, here's this website again, conventionofstates.com. Click on the menu selection, Take Action, and scroll down and look at the different volunteer opportunities we have here in the state. If anyone's of interest to you, open it up, read about it. If you're very interested in it, go ahead and make application. You're not obligated in any way. But when you make application, then your name comes up on a report that I see as well as some others. And then one of us can get in contact with you and talk to you further about your interest. So we're always looking for people to fill leadership roles. So I would encourage you to please check out our website, click on Take Action, and look at the different positions that we have. All right, let's get into now the basics of Convention of States. These are the three tenets of Convention of States, and we call these the basics. This is what we're all about. And the three tenets: the problem, the solution, and the plan. The problem, very quickly, is our government is basically out of control, lacks the will and the courage to address certain basic structural issues in our country, in our government. Now, we're not blaming any one political party. Both parties have contributed to this, and it's been going on for decades. This is not something that's happened just recently. So once again, our government our officials lack the will and the courage to address these abuses. And we've identified, as part of the problem, we've identified three, what we refer to as abuses by the federal government. Number one is our national debt issue. And that's why we're starting off talking about this tonight with our discussion with Paul on the Indiana Balanced Budget Amendment. But if you follow this at all, you know our country has a debt problem, has a debt issue, and little to nothing is being done to address it. And if you throw in the unfunded liabilities, the national debt it may have surpassed 23 trillion by now. Unfunded liabilities, I've heard numbers of upwards of 250 trillion. So we have a problem with our national debt. The second abuse has to do with the regulatory crisis, the administrative state, and I know our current administration has taken some steps to eliminate some regulations, but much more needs to be done, especially in the area of how these regulations are created. And so it's a regulatory crisis, the administrative state. The last abuse area has to do with state sovereignty, really, where when our country was founded, it was founded on a concept of dual federalism, where the states and the federal government would share power. Well, that is all tilted toward the federal government. And we believe that the career, yes, power and money play a role in this, but we believe the career politician plays a role in this. And we want to try and address that particular abuse. All right. Well, what's our solution to this? Our solution is to hold a convention of states for the purpose of amending the Constitution according to Article 5 of our Constitution. Now, Article 5 describes two methods to propose amendments, or two methods of amending our Constitution. Let's just touch on those very briefly. The first method in Article 5 is the method we're used to seeing, where 2/3 of Congress propose an amendment or amendments, and then those proposed amendments would have to be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states. Excuse me. Well, there is a second method embedded there in Article 5, and the second method is whereby 2/3 of the state legislatures apply and call for a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution. Now, 2/3 of the state legislatures would mean 34 states would need to make application. Any proposed amendments that would come out of that convention would have to go through the same ratification process as in method 1. 3/4 of the state legislatures would have to ratify any proposed amendment or amendments that would come out of the convention. 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 38 states. This is what we're trying to do. This is what we're trying to bring about, is a convention of states for the purpose of proposing amendments to the Constitution that would address those three abuses that we identified as part of the problem. Now, what's our plan? Our plan is that basically in two parts. The first part has to do with the actual application strategy, where we have actually, Convention of States has actually designed the application that we want to get 34 states to sign on to. And in that application, in the subject matter of that application, we set forth three areas: fiscal restraints, limiting the power and jurisdiction of the federal government, and term limits for Congress as well as the federal judiciary. Now, it's the subject matter of that application that determines the agenda of the convention. So that's very important, the subject matter of the application. Now, the other part of our plan is mobilizing the grassroots. When we say the grassroots, we're talking about you, me, our state legislators, and mobilizing these people to bring this about. So that's what the grassroots plays a major role in Convention of States, not only in Indiana, but nationally. And we have a great deal of momentum going. You know, I said we need to get to 34 states. Well, we have 15 that have signed on to this. And yes, Indiana is one of those states. We were the 6th state to pass this application, or resolution it's called. So we're now in all 50 states. We have over 30,000 supporters here in Indiana, over 4 million nationwide. So momentum is building, and the support for calling for a convention of states is growing every day. So if you have any interest, we would love to have you get involved with us. All right, let me go back to seeing me. And in this segment, we're on our way to wrapping up. I want to recognize those individuals some of those individuals that have tuned in with us tonight. I see a name here, Steve Province. I hope I'm pronouncing that right, Steve. Thank you for joining us tonight. Glad to have you. Johnny Bronner. These are both new names to our viewers this evening. So, Johnny, welcome and glad to have you viewing tonight. And Bill Jameson, another new viewer this evening. Glad to have you on board, Bill. Thank you all of you for joining us this evening, and hope you've enjoyed our broadcast this evening. Let me tell you a little bit about our next broadcast, which will be 1 week from tonight, which will be October 14th. And we're going to have one of our district captains, Melba Kaiser, will be coming on, and Melba will be talking about, basically, I want to say her story. Now, Melba came to the United States as a child, became a citizen. So Melba has, I think, a wonderful story that I think we'll all enjoy hearing, and how she has grown to love our country, and of course becoming part of our Convention of States movement, and she's a district captain now. So Melba is going to be joining us next Monday evening to tell us about her story here in the United States. All right. Well, let's kind of then wrap things up here, and let me bring in, I wanted to bring up a photo here. There it is. Okay, let me get it organized a little bit better. Hope you can see this. But I always like closing out our broadcast with a quote from one of our founders, Mark Meckler. And Mark has always said that, there's a fundamental question facing our country today. And the question is not what should we do? The question really is who will decide. And I think that that quote has stuck with me ever since I first heard that. And just like I say, I can see, or I display here in this picture, the question facing us is a two-word question. Very simply, who decides? So the question is not what should we do, the question is who decides. Obviously, we think here in Convention of States that we, the people, should have a greater role in who decides. So once again, folks, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and look forward to meeting with you again next Monday evening. So have a good evening, and thank you for joining us. Good night, everyone.